Hey, Mel here. Welcome back to the Evanscape. Um, I just finally gotten around to watching Star Trek Discovery Season 3, Episode 1, because, well, I'm here in Canada and Crave, for some reason, puts on the episode 2 days after, nearly 2 days after, at 9 p.m. No joke, 9 p.m. on Friday, which is roughly nearly 2 days after the midnight premiere on Thursday. Well, no apologies, but that's why I'm doing this late. I'm not happy with Crave. Let's all spam them folks and demand that they put it on same day. But anyway, here goes. Star Trek Discovery Season 3, Episode 1, The Hope Is You. I'm not sure what's going on with that title, but that's what it is. So, the last we left Michael Burnham and the crew of the Discovery, Michael Burnham was literally taking a time suit to the future and leading the Discovery along with her. And I'm not a fan of the time traveling suit, but that's just one of the many issues that I've seen people criticize this show for. Those issues might be a little petty, but whatever. Anyway, Star Trek Discovery Season 3, Episode 1, The Hope Is You. What is it about? So Michael Burnham crash lands nearly 1,000 years into the future. Yikes, the 32nd century. So I think the date given was 3188. E. Um, she crash lands into the ship belonging to Book, who is played by David Ajala, who is not the same character as Kraft from the Star Trek Short Trek episode Calypso, contrary to what I've seen. Please, folks, not all black men look alike. But this is a different character altogether, and what we learn is he is a courier and he works for, I guess, I'm not sure what he does. He transports things, and he's basically stolen a an endangered species, and he's bringing it to some sort of sanctuary, but we don't know that right off the bat. We just know he and Burnham crash into each other, and Burnham is happy that she detects life. I'm not sure what that even means because that could be anything, but she's happy, and eventually, after some misunderstanding, see Burnham having to physically assault him. The two go to Requiem, which is, I guess, a mercantile future city, and there he kind of betrays her, and shenanigans happen, and they're on the run. And Burnham might have killed a bunch of people, which I don't understand. But anyway, eventually the two come to an understanding, blah, blah, blah. And this is the focus of this episode. Yeah. Burnham later meets a man whose name I cannot remember all that well right now, who has been, according to him, he's been in this abandoned um, Federation station for like 40 years. I can't imagine how or why, but he is hoping to get the Federation back because the Federation doesn't exist, not in this century, not since the burn, which we learn happened 120 years prior and had to do with the explosion of dilithium all across the galaxy, which has led to the end of warp drive technology, at least for the Federation, which ultimately put the Federation out of commission. Um, there are so many things to unpack here. I don't understand what that is, has to do with much of anything, but we'll see. Anyway, the point I wanted to get to was I don't understand why the Federation is seen as important. I mean, we haven't seen enough of the world of the 32nd century to understand why the Federation is important. And what I mean by that is, I just recently rewatched Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and there's that season 3 episode, The Wish. In it, Cordelia, an angry Cordelia, makes a wish with Anya, the wish demon, to that she her wish was that she wished Buffy Summers never came to Sunnydale. And then we transfer into a very grim reality. And in that reality, Buffy Summers is not in Sunnydale, and we see how grim it is without Buffy Summers. It's a horrible world, and it's much darker. There are far more deaths. The demons rule everything, and even our precious Xander and Willow are now vampires. It's a horrible, horrible world, and so we learn to appreciate Buffy. The problem here with Discovery is that we are being told that the Federation represents hope and great ideals, but so far we've only seen Requiem, which is a mercantile city, and we haven't seen, it doesn't seem all that bad compared to what we've seen before. So I'm not getting the sense as that this is a grim, dark world without the Federation. I haven't gotten that yet. We haven't seen enough of the 32nd century to understand why the Federation is important or why it should be important and why it's so important to bring it back. Until that happens, I don't think I buy this. Federation represents hope. I think this may be a kind of nostalgia, relying on the viewer's understanding of the Federation from previous series. But the show itself hasn't shown why the Federation is so important. We haven't seen the extent of how bad this world is without the Federation. And I'm not saying this won't come, but I think that in episode one, to just show someone representing the Federation and desiring to have it back without showing the context of why that's so important, it doesn't do anything for me. It feels empty. It feels empty. And this is sort of what Discovery has been accused of. It's been accused of sort of telling you things without showing you things. Tell us, don't tell us why the Federation is important. Show us why this world without the Federation is so bad. So far, it looks so so. Everything looks so so. Even the technology looks so so. But again, this has been blamed on the fact that, well, Star Trek Discovery was so advanced looking for its timeline that once they jump 1,000 years into the future, the technology looks more or less the same. The only impressive technology here was the com badge that now serves as a transporter in and of itself. You no longer have to click on it and say beat me up or beam me up. Now you can just do that on your own. And that's the only thing that sort of exists that looks super um, interesting in terms of technological change. But, the other things I've seen some other people complaining about is Michael Burnham and the fact that this show is Star Trek Michael Burnham instead of Star Trek Discovery. We haven't seen any of the other crew members in this episode, so it's only about Michael Burnham and her journey, I guess, to maybe find them. Um, but a lot of the criticism of the show stems from the fact that it's not so much that the show is bad, but that whatever that even means, but rather than it doesn't seem like Star Trek. And I've seen the criticism that it looks more like Star Wars, or at the very least um, some generic science fiction show, but not Star Trek. Aesthetically, it's very different from Star Trek, And what's more, no one's wearing uniforms here, so that doesn't help. Anyway, I don't know. I think if you can separate the problem is, if you can separate the show from Star Trek, then it's a decent science fiction show. But of course, you cannot do that because it is technically Star Trek, which basically poses a huge problem for the show. It's no longer part of the 23rd century, which is good, but by pushing itself so far into the future, past, say, the temporal Cold War, which was a thing in both Voyager and Enterprise, which we now learn time travel has been outlawed in the galaxy due to the temporal Cold Wars. I think in Enterprise it was the 29th century. We saw the time traveler from the 29th century who kept coming back to bother Archer, and now this is a 32nd century where time travel is now illegal after the temporal Cold Wars. But okay, whatever. But they addressed a lot of that. The the burn, the dilithium basically exploding and all at once. The hint there is that this is definitely sabotage, that this was not some random accident. So I'm guessing this is going to be one of the major plot points going forward. Who did this? Was it the Klingons, the Suliban, the Romulans? I hope it's no generic Star Trek antagonistic races. I hope maybe it's just a brand new race. Um, there are other things I would love to look forward to. I mean, I know that, for example, the Metrons from the TOS episode Arena had told Kirk, these were the guys who, I'm using guys, but really these were the individuals who were responsible for forcing Kirk to fight the Gorn. And there is some mentions of the Gorn in this one. So that should be interesting. But the Metron had told Kirk that they will introduce themselves to humans in about 1,000 years, and we're now about 1,000 years. So it will be interesting to see going forward what other races will come into play in this new world. I'm hoping that it's not the typical Star Trek antagonist. What I've always said is Star Trek has always worked best. Each series has always worked best when it finds its own footing, its own villains, or its own interest in races instead of relying on what came before. And now that Discovery is not beholden to what came before, it can do whatever it wants, technically. So anyway, I don't hate this show. And again, Michael Burnham, I think a lot of people who have hate for this character, as I've said in a previous video, they need to examine where that's coming from. I guess, the Mary Sue aspects do are problematic, but it doesn't justify the hatred of the character. And I understand making the show Star Trek Burnham instead of Star Trek Discovery and making Burnham a savior and the chosen one is not good for the narrative. But please don't don't use that as an excuse for why you don't like this character. I didn't have a problem with the show, but again, I see a lot of the criticism centers on this is not Star Trek, as opposed to this is bad. It's more like this is not Star Trek, and I don't want to see Michael Burnham. Why is she the center of everything? Um, Stylistic criticism is not the same as quality criticism, and there are a lot of things to criticize the show about stylistically. I mean, quality wise, as I've said about season 1 and 2, the techno babble, the over the top action scenes, the fast breakneck pace of the storytelling, a lot of these things, the bad science, a lot of these things were valid, but I don't think criticizing the show for not being aesthetically similar to what came before or stylistically similar to what came before is valid criticism. You know, yes, that your criticism is not as bad as the Fandom Menace criticism, where it's all about it's the social justice warriors, but it doesn't mean that the criticism is valid. And you keep saying, I cannot get invested in this. And you cannot relate to a black female protagonist. I don't know. um Again, see my rant about Michael Burnham, but the point I'm making is I can't tell you what to like and what not to like. I don't hate this show even for all its flaws. And anyway, I'm gonna cut off here because I think this is a long rant. Let me know what you think of season 3 episode 1. The Hope Is You. If you liked it, if you agreed with a lot of the criticism that this is a generic science fiction show but not Star Trek, or what your other thoughts you have about the show, ideas or predictions about what's going on with the dilithium the Burn, or even the main character of Book, which so far many people seem to like and seem to suggest that he has more chemistry with Burnham than Ash Tyler. But I have a soft spot for Ash Tyler. I just like those mopey, whiny, Byronic hero types. I'm so tortured by everything I've ever done. And, I need you to love me. But anyway, please subscribe, folks. And my voice is breaking because I'm not used to speaking for long periods of time. But please subscribe and please let me know what you think about the new season of Star Trek Discovery.